In an earlier episode of this series, we mentioned how those who believe in supernatural pseudoscience often try to rely on the fallacy of false equivalence. In this illustration, for example, we see a common claim that we're both looking at the same evidence, we're just interpreting it differently. However, in science, evidence is a body of objectively verifiable facts that are positively indicative of and or exclusively concordant with one available position over any other. So it is not even possible for the same fact to be evident of two different mutually exclusive conclusions at the same time. We have to look at every proposition and any alternatives as if each are competing hypotheses. If the same fact could be true in either case, then it's just a fact. It doesn't become evidence until it indicates one option or eliminates another. So we can't both be looking at the same evidence. And we're obviously not both looking at endogenous retroviruses, atavisms, transitional forms, physiological, anatomical, and molecular vestiges, ontogeny and developmental biology, protein functional redundancy, convergent phenotypes, mobile genes, observed speciation, or the myriad methods of dating geologic stratigraphy, nor any twin-nested hierarchy of phylogenetic clades. And those are just a brief hint of the evidence of evolution. So, what evidence do we have for creationism? Man-made mythology written by ignorant primitives who believed in magic and were absolutely wrong about every scientific claim they ever made because they obviously had no idea what they were talking about. That's it, and nothing else. Creationists who worship their sacred scripture insist that the claim be accepted as evidence of itself, but that's circular reasoning, another fallacy, being a belief or argument that is unsound or invalid. There is no actual factual evidence of creation at all. Now, some believers pretend that there is evidence for their sacred beliefs, but they have to redefine what evidence means. If one adopts the philosophy that everything is an illusion, then evidence is not evident, because facts are not factual, because nothing can ever be objective, because everything is imaginary. Not kidding. There really are prominent religious apologists who actually do imply this in their arguments. Because they're okay with not having any evidence to back their beliefs as long as they never have to acknowledge evidence that they're wrong. So they might say that evidence is ambiguous, which it can't be. By definition, evidence is factual, meaning objectively verifiable and indicative, so it can't be ambiguous or it wouldn't be evidence. Anecdotes and eyewitness testimony are the least reliable form of evidence, only valuable when supporting something else or in the absence of anything else, and that will be refuted by any other type of evidence that stands against it. Yet devotees demand that all that be turned upside down, as if the way you think you remember things could somehow override video surveillance showing otherwise. It doesn't work that way. Our memories aren't perfect. We're subject to confusion, distortion, delusion, and prejudicial bias, and we can't always be trusted to be truthful either. That's why we need objective confirmation from supportive witnesses, or preferably evidence, rather than relying solely on your own personal feelings or opinions. Now, why would anyone want to believe something that is not evidently, probably, or even possibly true? That's irrational, but that's the point. People most often embrace religion for emotional reasons or out of fear rather than logic or reason, and they're very susceptible to what an entire community of their peers passionately insist that they must believe or be ostracized and bastardized if they don't. Remember that religion rewards belief, not works, and threatens to punish lack of belief while promising to forgive any sin as long as you believe. And you're supposed to believe on authority rather than evidence. So gullibility is the sole criteria for redemption. No goals are achieved directly by God, but rather by believing in God. So believers believe in belief, often as a willful act of deliberate self-deception, wherein they may find any excuse, however feeble, that satisfies their own desperate rationalization, and call that evidence. Like if the laminin molecule assumes literally the simplest of all possible constructs, that's somehow supposed to imply a God and override anything we know to be true in science? Things like that seem good enough for the people who say, "Look how the glory of God is evident in the sunset." But not in the children's cancer ward. Don't look over there. And don't look at parasites either. Just look at the awe and don't wonder. And consequently, the biggest difference between reason and faith is the difference between knowledge and belief. Reason wants to improve understanding of whatever turns out to be true, regardless what that is, while faith pretends to know what no one even can know and demands that we swallow all the required doctrine without question, without reservation, without reason, and not even consider anything else, regardless whether it's true or not. The truth is what the facts are. But if it doesn't matter what the facts are, then it doesn't matter what the truth is. That's why the faithful tell me they're still going to believe whatever they want to believe, no matter what, even if it's not true. Doesn't matter. So defenders of the faith are likely to be duped by the Bible's description of how to make believe. And here we have things hoped for but not seen, which is the basis of faith, believing things without evidence. And then we're looking at things that are not seen, or convincing yourself of what isn't there or can't really be true. Equally important in this case is another fallacy called confirmation bias, not seeing what is seen so that you don't risk challenging your faith. And this denial of objective perspective is sometimes described as,
let's use our biblical glasses.
Every logical fallacy has been used as an argument for God, and every argument for God is a logical fallacy, but the most common of all fallacies among religious believers is question begging, being the circular argument routing back to an assumed conclusion. This is also a product of the mind projection fallacy, where subjective impressions are assumed to be objectively real, as if even imaginary things undoubtedly exist, and that anyone who doesn't share this same delusion is simply written off as dishonest or foolish. Now, to show you what I mean, let's see a presentation of all these fallacies being demonstrated at the same time.
To look out at this and the heavens declaring the glory of God and deny the existence and reality of God makes you a fool. There is no doubt about that. There is absolutely not one shred of observable evidence for evolution, but there is evidence of God's creative handiwork all around us.
Of course, the truth is that there has never been a single verifiably accurate argument of evidence indicative of miraculous creation over biological evolution or any other avenue of actual science. Not one, period. There is no fact that implies that God is even possible, much less probable, and there's certainly nothing to indicate such a thing. Nor is it even logical. Since God is supposed to exist outside of our reality, then he does not exist in reality. There is no supernatural anything that has any determinable reality anyway. There is no truth to any of that. Nothing we can show to be true and thus actually know. All of it is indistinguishable from the illusions of delusion from a land of pure imagination. But there is an overwhelming preponderance of observable evidence for evolution, beginning with the fact that evolution actually happens even under direct observation, that biodiversity and complexity do increase naturally as alleles vary and increasing distinction in reproductive populations, where several definitely beneficial mutations have been verified to occur and are inherited by descendant sets, and each such variation is accelerated in genetically isolated groups. And then there's the fact that multiple independent sets of biological markers do exist to trace these lineages through the genome, even to a sequence of phylogenetic clades, wherein we can prove that birds are a subset of dinosaurs in the same way that humans are a subset of apes, primates, eutherian mammals, and vertebrate deuterostome animals. The collective genome of all animals has been traced to its most basal form, and those forms are also indicated by comparative morphology, physiology, and embryological development. And then there's the fact that every animal on Earth has determinable relatives either living nearby or evident in the fossil record, which holds hundreds of transitional species, even according to the strictest definition of that word. All of these are objectively verifiable facts that are also positively indicative of evolution, making them evidence for evolution. And not only do they not also align with creationism, they contradict it as a competing alternative, being evidence against creationism. So we're not both looking at the same evidence. Religious extremists won't look at or for any evidence at all.